to November 8th. And I think on the July 8th, I think that the crocodile tooth downward release on that extends out maybe 36 to 40 hours. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I'd have to go back to check. Sort of makes sense?
It makes sense. A lot of people are concerned with this civil unrest. Does your data detail any of that at all? We've had a lot of threads on civil unrest.
Living it at the moment, of course. You know, we've had people crash airplanes. We've got the FBI trying to whip up anti-militia activity. Who knows what other kind of stuff going on. Plus, we also have to acknowledge to ourselves as we look out into the wider world two important points about civil unrest. First, it is a weapon that will be used by the propagandist against you. It will be used to get the sheeple to rally against any group that the propagandists care to aim their finger at, and you don't want to be on the other end of that finger, or you do. It's your choice. Then there's the other aspect of the civil unrest. To a certain extent, or to a great extent, it falls into the traps set by the powers that be. Further, if civil unrest breaks out, it is precisely what they want because they are geared towards dealing with violence, both in terms of the groups that they are able to then go and bust heads, as well as the threat that is implicitly implied by busting those heads on primetime TV in front of everybody else. So we have to be aware of this. If we have a situation where civil unrest breaks out, it's one of those issues where I'm going to sit back and take a relaxed view as before assigning blame. And to a certain extent, if we look at it, it's kind of what has been said in the language about the no-nuke stuff that came out of the White House. I've heard a lot of people getting all whipped up about it. Oh, he sold us out, blah, 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 blah. And be that as it may, their emotionalism aside, they missed the language and what it said. It was basically, in my way of reading what came out of the White House relative to the non-nuclear use, it was a statement that, if something happens to the U.S., we can't be absolutely sure that the military is telling us the truth about who did it, and therefore we won't authorize the use of their terror weapons against innocent populations because it might be the military themselves, and we're letting them know in advance by making these statements. Again, sort of makes sense? It's the same kind of thing that's going on relative to the civil unrest. I think there may indeed be agent provocateurs out there planning to instigate riots and civil unrest around specific key points within the U.S., and it may be part of that crocodile tooth pattern in July onward.
Susie had a question here about almost 15 minutes ago, and I'd like kind of roll some of those back here as quick as we can before you got to go. Susie, you still got your ears on there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, Cliff. I'd like to ask you a question in regards to NASA and our government. If they actually have the capability of creating the second coming of Jesus Christ with holograms?
That's an interesting question. There's actually two parts of that. A hidden part of it is that you'd have to have, let me put it this way, they could not so create that illusion for me because I'm not a Christ follower for one. That instantly means that none of the neural pathways in my brain would be triggered by their propaganda, and I'd sit back and say, I'm going to check this out. Whereas the people that had been prepped for that would so assume. So in that sense, they could probably get away with the illusion, yes, especially if there was enough prep done in advance. I mean, people will believe all kinds of horseshit. It's just a matter of getting them to understand it in some other capacity than horseshit. Make sense?
Yes, I guess I was just asking if they basically have the capability, the technology, to do that on a global type basis with the hologram.
There's a fractal technology and then there's holographic technology. And the two either could be used or both could be used together. So yes, you could create a big hologram, as some people have suggested was the tetrahedron over Moscow. They suggest that it was indeed an illusion created by a complex holographic technique. You could do that, but an easier way for them to do that would be direct mind control, which would be done at a scalar fractal level, where the images they wouldn't have to create a big Jesus coming out of the sky image and have it float around the planet, as a lot of people would imagine. I would think that the easier way to do it would be to fire up all the scalar technology and just simply trigger neural pathways within people's mind that they know create specific images, if you are so pre-programmed to accept those images. Again, make sense?
Yes, thank you for answering that.
Cliff, you kind of mentioned before, about our new nuclear policy, but I'd like to ask you a question. Do the Webbot see a nuclear bomb or an atomic device being used in any way at all by either a superpower, nation state, or some sort of rogue group, terrorist organization, or anyone, say, within the next year? Do you see an atomic bomb going off on Earth?
Let me answer that by first prefacing it and saying it's like religion. It's one of those subjects where there's just a whole lot of hot discussion about it and very little delta and very little emotional difference from week to week. So and we live in that delta. We live in the emotional shifts that occur, and thus the change in words. So if there's very little change in the language, there's not a whole lot for us to read. However, that being said, we don't have anything other than the Israeli mistake that relates to nuclear, other than the potential for a nuclear accident related to a volcano somewhere. But it appears that the volcano triggers a shakedown, if you will, of a nuke plant in some capacity where the rods are damaged and spilled, and it's nasty but not catastrophic and is dealt with by local authorities. Now, the Israeli mistake is another issue. That appears to be something really bizarre, like a nuclear tip bunker buster that goes too deep and hits an oil field and sets off this radioactive volcano thing that we all have to deal with. Now, bear in mind, if we approach November 8th and we see a ramp up in early November of the Israelis versus Iranians, then my money would be that on the 8th that they fire off their attack on Iran. For the next 4 days, the world is held in a grip of fear as we kind of wonder what's going on, and then we go into the magnitude of the mistake as the nuke, oil, fire, whatever it is, produces a global fallout that we all have to live with for the next 2 months as we wonder whether or not the fallout's going to come on us. That would all fit the timing, although we don't have any data to suggest that that's the occurrence. And we do know at this point that there's no release prior to July 8th that would suggest the Israelis do anything to anybody really significant relative to Iran.
Cliff, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
By the way, I really love your work, man. I think you rock. I've just got a question about the powers that be. I mean, who are they? In your reads, I mean, who are they? Does it just stop at the 13 families? If it is the 13 families, is there something above that? Who are these people?
I found how we defined the entity, and that'll give you an idea, and you can actually validate a lot of my research. We've got this analysis set of spiders, little software written in C code that reads websites, and it extracts words and plugs them into the lexicon and gives us, if you will, an emotional picture of that particular website. And so I went and hit the Council for Foreign Relations here in the U.S. They've got a website that's just filled with all kinds of treasure things to read if you're a linguist, because they betray so much of their organization in even their casual chatter back and forth. And they have all of these think pieces, and you should really pay attention to the think pieces that the Council on Foreign Relations puts out, because this is their plan, and they're discussing it and critiquing it among themselves. Anyway, so that led me to a series of tracings, and we went from the connections from the Council on Foreign Relations over to the all the way back through actually into the British royal family and connections into the Fabian Society, which led us into connections back to Yale, which led us to the 322 groups, which include the Skull and Bones but are not limited to Skull and Bones, all of which trace their roots back to the Society of Death in Germany. And it comes back to this. In short order, you can think of the powers that be at a very critical level as being those people that attend Bilderberger meetings. There is a higher group, a higher selection within that group, And those would be the people that organize the Bilderberger meetings. And we note that those go all the way back to a bunch of prominent Nazi fellows. So to a certain extent, we can say that Germany may have lost the war, but the Nazis did not. In fact, to a real true extent. A great number of the people are connected, of course, to the royal families. So you can go back the other way, and you can start looking at genealogy. So when, what's his name, Kerry, the Democrat stooge, was against Bush, the pretender, and they were both cousins to the Queen and all of this kind of stuff, that really points out who's running what and who is the powers that be. I actually stop at the people that attend Bilderberger, figuring that anybody that's outside of that power loop, whatever their personal family connections or bloodline, is not effectively yielding power, and we can kind of just set them to a side a bit. There certainly is a core group within Bilderberger. I think its number fundamentally eventually